There's I feel there's an identity crisis with World Wrestling Entertainment. I've got my Shield shirt on. This week we had a very strong punch in the gut. Universal Champion Roman Reigns revealed he's been dealing with leukemia for 11 years, and it's back. So it was in remission, now it's back. You deal with that the rest of your life, and he's got to go off and fight that again. So he relinquishes the title. It's an emotional moment for fans and for anybody and everybody who's said anything bad about him over the last 2 years. That's all forgotten, and we move along. The WWE as a company is big on this is Susan G. Komen month. It's breast cancer awareness month for WWE, and they do tend to I don't want to say play up. I don't. But they do seem to have a heart when it comes to some of the social issues that people think about. I know the only one where it seems kind of tone deaf is when they do a Black History Month, and they put people on, and I'm like, I haven't seen that guy in weeks, because there's always been a feeling that for a black superstar in WWE, it is harder to become champion than it is if you're not. And I'm not saying whether that is or that isn't. I'm not going to say a whole lot on the matter because that's not the reason that I'm talking right now. But WWE does seem to have two faces to itself. This Sunday, WWE Evolution. And I have the WWE Network right now, in part because I want to see WWE Evolution. I want to see how women's pay-per-view is going to work. Do they have the courage to actually have a pay-per-view that is entirely driven by just women? Can they do that? Can WWE actually not have a John Cena appearance? Or, oh, look, Dean Ambrose and Seth Rollins are fighting in the ring. Where'd they come from? Like, can we actually have just the women in the ring? Along the way, WWE's a major moneymaker. Now, I know there's people who brush WWE aside and say, oh, it's just crap. They have their own 24/7 network. And while a lot of the programming is filler, completely agree a lot of it's filler, some of it is relatively entertaining. WWE Ride Along is usually pretty entertaining. Last night they had Becky and Charlotte together on the episode I watched. Of course, they say this was filmed before they turned against each other, and I'm thinking, not necessarily. They could still travel together. I remember seeing WWE here, and it was Eugene was traveling with William Regal, even though they were in a feud at the time. So being in a feud with each other no longer means what it used to with wrestling. But this is much bigger than wrestling. January 2nd, WWE stock prices were $31.41 US. September 28th, $96.73 US. You don't have to be a stock market guy to understand they went from a lot of money to, wow, we're swimming in it. Today, they opened at $74.51, and at the time I wrote the numbers on the board, they're at $69.70. They have shed a lot of money since September 28th. Why? Saudi Arabia. Crown Jewel takes place in 2 weeks. I'm not watching it. I don't care. And I honestly, I am choosing not to watch it because it's as close as I can get to any kind of a boycott with it. Yeah, I could just cancel the network altogether, but there is a lot of content on there I want to watch, and that's where I'm torn. I think back to WCW versus WWE, and WWE was the underdog company, and WCW is this big multi-billion-dollar corporation owned by, well, it was owned by the multi-billion-dollar corporations of Ted Turner, right? So WWE won that battle years ago, and now WWE's become kind of what WCW was. They're bringing out old guys to sell a pay-per-view. It is DX reuniting Shawn Michaels and Triple H against Undertaker and Kane, the Brothers of Destruction. But they're doing this in Saudi Arabia, and they've got a 10-year agreement with Saudi Arabia. And here's the thing. So everybody's pointing at the most recent, thing in the news with, this reporter getting killed in the consulate. Saudi Arabia has been known to be up to some rather heinous activity for many years. This is not new. WWE made a deal with them going, well, their money's clean, so we like money. And that's kind of where Vince is at. Vince really likes money. But here's the question that I have. So you've gone from $96 to $69. You've shed $27 per share in a month. Okay. Does the Saudi Arabian deal really make that big of a difference that you can shed that amount of money? And this is not going to be the bottom. What if you end up back down here? Is that deal really worth going from this back to this? I understand that companies and corporations are not sweet, wonderful things. I understand that there are a lot of companies making a lot of money on the backs of young kids and doing some rather seedy things behind the scenes, because it's kind of what major corporations do. But this is really overt at a time when companies are saying, we're just going to pull our money out of Saudi Arabia. And it's been insane to watch. There are people defending WWE and saying, well, these companies didn't pull out yet. Okay. WWE has Be a Star, which is their whole anti-bullying program. WWE Evolution, it's about equality. And the women are just as good as the men. There won't be a single woman displayed on the big screen during pre-show, post, intermissions in Saudi Arabia, because they're not allowed. There's no women on the Crown Jewel pay-per-view because they're not allowed to have women in the Crown Jewel pay-per-view. And I still believe that's why Evolution is happening. That they're having a women's only pay-per-view because they want to distract from the fact that the actual big pay-per-view that's coming up, which is Crown Jewel, is devoid of all female wrestlers. So the women will come out of Evolution and they'll go right into getting ready for Survivor Series. But it does give me pause. And I get it. This is a company that is really, they love cash. And it goes back to the 80s. Vince McMahon didn't buy up all of the smaller companies to consolidate them so that he'd pay the wrestlers a ton of money and everybody'd get rich. That's not what happened. The territories went out of business in the 80s because of Vince McMahon. And he bought companies he didn't really have to, but he's like, I'll just take that then. Then I get that territory, and I'll take that one, and I'll take that one, and before you know it, done. And I remember wrestling in the 80s, and I remember before WWE had everything, and you had choices. WWE was the polished product. AWA was the one that felt kind of old-fashioned Midwest. NWA was your Deep South hardcore wrestling. I remember Florida, you had UWF that was out there for a little while, which felt real. Of all the companies, UWF felt real. And Dr. Death, Steve Williams, and Hacksaw Jim Duggan were the big headliners down there. And Hacksaw Jim Duggan as a heel was fantastic. Jim Duggan as a heel was awesome. With that 2x4 when he was a bad guy, man, he was so entertaining. And, I remember all that. I remember the sheep herders. Forget about the bushwhackers. I remember the sheep herders. I remember before they were the sheep herders I remember when they were sheep herders before they were the bushwhackers in WWE, and they were all, yay! I remember when, the funny thing was, there was three of them, and you had Butch and Luke, and I remember who was in the ring, if it was Luke or it was Butch, and the USH crowd chant started, because they had the American guy in the chokehold, and there's USA, USA, and it was either Butch or Luke that was on the apron. Turns around, was US bloody A, and he points at the guy that got choked out. Stopped. The chant stopped right at that moment. This company is about trying to water everything down and making it good for kids. Fine. Rated PG, we're good for kids. Fine. Why are you making a deal with a country that you're going to have to explain yourself about for the next 10 years. I mean, you know, fine. You want to just take that money, fine. But then just give up on watering down the product. Like, article I read on, I think it was CBS Sports, where they talk about WWE and they compare it with UFC and how they've allowed fighters who just tested positive for drugs to as soon as they clear, they put them right back into title matches because they like money. Merriweather, supposedly, you know, he should have gone to jail, but they pushed back his sentence so that he can get into a fight so Vegas can make some money. But they don't try to be family friendly. UFC doesn't try to be family friendly. They don't pretend there's something they're not. They don't. And in the midst of all this McGregor and Habib stuff, they don't pretend there's something they're not. Boxing's barely relevant at this stage of the game. Ever since Mike Tyson lost the title to Buster Douglas, and they've really lacked what they need, which is a dominant, hated champion. And I mean, you need a guy that, part of what made Merriweather work is that everybody wants to see him get his block knocked off. That's really what it is. And WWE has this family-friendly thing, and they have comedy sketches, and they have these great, like Truth TV is hilarious and fantastic. I love the dance stuff that he's doing with Carmella, and Carmella looks much better with brown hair. I'm just going to throw that out there. Brown and burgundy hair. It's not just brown. But it just to me feels like you've got this program on the air which flies in the face of what the company is. And where the company has said, yep, we're going to leave it the way it is. Yes, they would have lost money if they had pulled out of the deal with Saudi Arabia and said, we're sorry. In the light of what's going on right now, we can't do it. But I don't think the stock would have fallen this far. And in their desire for money, see, part of what we as people are trying to do, and I know it's not going to work, is we're trying to hold companies accountable for the partnerships they make. So we're not just saying, okay, I'll buy that pair of shoes because they're cheap. We're saying this corporation that made that cheap pair of shoes, yeah, I really don't like their labor practices. I'm going to buy that one that's $20 more, but that company I haven't heard anything bad about yet. I really think we're in an age where what a company does is important to people, even to investors. And it opens up a whole new thing, really. Because if this means that they're going to be having pay-per-views regularly in Saudi Arabia, they can get used to people criticizing them. And there are wrestlers who have, and nobody's come out publicly and said it, but there are rumors there are wrestlers who really don't want to go over there right now. And honestly, in that environment, I can't say that I necessarily blame them. Corey Graves, when they were over in Saudi Arabia last time, he sent out a picture, I believe was on Instagram, which was of, I think it was just of a martini glass, and he said, you know, being away from home, it makes me appreciate the rights and freedoms that we have as Americans at home. And rumor had it that the company got mad at him for posting that. He never said Saudi Arabia in it, but it was pretty obvious that he meant, you know, over here you can't really do what you can at home. It makes me appreciate home. And WWE told him, you shut up about that. Anti-bullying. Fantastic. But I'd be interested to know what you guys think. Do you think it doesn't matter? Or do you think it does? Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.